Today we're going to talk about air raid shelters, and as you can see I'm actually inside one that was used by a household, and we're going to talk a little bit about this one in particular a little bit later on. But we have to ask our question, what was the need for these? Why did these even exist in the UK? And today we're going to talk about it. Back in World War I, the UK was being bombarded with Zeppelin attacks and Gothier bombers. Excuse the pronunciation. There was a need to build more, as the UK government thought at the time that this is going to be the future of warfare, where the UK would be hit with bombing raids and so on, and different types of future artillery and rockets. And they thought, we need to invest in this, as even though we thought that World War I was going to be the end, they thought they never can be too sure, as what they've seen was already destructive, but my word, were they right. In the 1920s and 30s, the UK was developing their air raid precautions, and in 1937 they set up their Raid Ward, which was a service to implement the building of new air raid bunkers across the UK in preparation for any certain future aerial bombardments from any future wars, as well as the implementation of various procedures that they put in place to ensure that in event of such an incident or a war, that everyone would be safe. Then in 1939, World War II hit. The Raid Ward implemented a vast number of ideas and plans to ensure that everyone would be safe. And this ranged from the use of basement cellars. Cellars were already very popular during World War I as a means of trying to stay safe, as the majority of houses built back then did actually have basements and cellars that could be used to go and hide in case of emergency, as it was better than nothing. There was also the use of underground stations, as we saw later on in World War II. Those were incredibly popular, as thousands of people could fit down there and be safe. As you may notice, if you go on a local village green, you might notice that there might be a communal air raid shelter, as these would tend to be built on village greens, on places where there tends to be a high number of people, so sort of the end of roads or sort of the intersection of roads. And in the 1940s, these were really pushed forward as an actual scheme that was fully implemented across the UK, as not everyone could afford or even have the space for an air raid shelter. Now moving on to the one that pretty much everyone should know about, or does know about, or has heard of before, which is the Anderson shelter, which is a corrugated iron air raid shelter which was mass produced across the UK. And this is the one that you typically find in houses where you go out in the back garden, you realise you go and dig something and it's like, oh, it's a metal room. And then it'd be what was an Anderson shelter. And these were mass produced across the UK. These were originally designed in 1939 and were named after Sir John Anderson, who was the Lord Privy Seal tasked with developing air raid shelters and ideas that could be implemented nationwide to ensure that everyone could be safe in case of an aerial bombing. By the start of World War I, 1.5 million Anderson shelters had been built across the UK. And by the end of the war, a further 2.1 million had been built. They only cost £7 back then, which was only £460 for something that would save your life. Or if you earned less than £5 a week, you could get an Anderson shelter for free, which was quite a popular scheme across the UK, and everyone was trying to get a hold of it. However, with the implementation of the V1 rocket, these did not seem highly effective. First of all, you need a garden, and not everyone actually had a garden to build one of these in, and they actually required time, and a lot of them were damp and also had water seeping in, so in bad conditions you would not actually be able to stay in it because it would either get flooded, damp, or you just didn't have the space. So this introduced the Morrison shelter, as they say, a dual purpose. So it's a coffee table during the day, and at night it would save your life. And this was incredibly popular towards the end of the war, where people were purchasing these, trying to stay safe in their own building if they didn't have a garden, for example, or their Anderson shelter was flooded and it wasn't actually safe to stay in. And by 1941, over 500,000 Morrison shelters were implemented across the UK. We're not sure on exact numbers by the end of World War II, but by 1941, over 500,000 of these Morrison shelters were implemented across the UK. And this kind of brings us onto this one. Now let's talk about the air raid shelter that I've been stood in this whole time. It was originally constructed in 1938 as part of two air raid shelters that existed, and this was originally for the servant that lived in the house, and the other one had a direct tunnel into the basement of the house and all the way into the main part of the house. And it is unusual to see something of this size constructed out of concrete in someone's garden. And as we walk down into it, you notice on the wall, this is a bit of a fun fact, as we walk down into it, you might notice on the wall they've got these sort of marks where it looks like a plank has been applied. Around that period, it was a popular technique where you would use planks of wood to cast the concrete, which I thought was fascinating. Never thought of that before when I was researching into it. They actually used wood planks to cast the concrete, and that gives you that effect on the walls. And as we go down into it, you might notice this vent. This is connected up to the surface, and we're always trying to find out where it actually came up through the surface. And it turns out it comes up to a sundial. So underneath the sundial in our garden, there is an actual vent inside it that allows for the air raid shelter to be aerated the whole time, and also allowed for the air raid shelter to be disguised, because it's a bit obvious if there's the main house and then you see a massive vent and you think, oh, I'm the enemy, I'm going to possibly drop a bomb on it, I'm going to destroy it, as we would have been right under the sort of return line from London that the German aircraft would be taking to go and unload their payload. And then apart from that, as we go further into it, I did realise that there was a bat, so I won't be showing you the main room, as I have to keep my distance away from it, as don't want to disturb it, as I only realised once it started moving, I thought, ooh, that's a bat, because I thought it was just something hanging down. But yeah, so it had a door that, funny enough, was locked from the outside. It's still been untouched for over 80 years now. And it is in immaculate condition, as it was really well built with the ventilation. It still allows for airflow, and there's no damp or condensation in it. In the main room itself, it is just a concrete box. It is absolutely fascinating, even if it is a bit simple on the inside. But do let me know in the comments down below if you want me to do some more stuff, possibly excavate the other air raid shelter that we have thought about doing, and maybe we could find the secret tunnel that leads back into the house that was blocked off in the 1960s. And now for a fun fact, just to spice it up a little bit. So the British Home Guard during World War II had multiple little bunkers around the country, and these were there just in case of invasion. These were called scallywag bunkers. So you think, oh, pirate, but no, these were very similar to Anderson shelters, but on a much larger scale, that would house up to 20 men in some cases, and they were massive corrugated steel tubes that were buried underground, which were fully stocked just in case of a imminent invasion, as sort of a last resort if the pillboxes failed that were distributed across the UK. I hope you found that interesting today, and yeah, next week I'll try and find something else interesting. Let me know if you want me to explore anything else, and I'll see you in the next one.